You're listening to the Be Better Off Show by Kelly+Partners.
Well, welcome to the Be Better Off Show, where we get terrific Australians who can share great stories, their life stories and business journeys to help us all be healthier, wealthier and wiser. And this morning I've got Chris Duggan, the Group Managing Director of Bright & Duggan and President of Strata Community Australia, to join me to share his story. Good morning, Chris.
Brett, thank you for having me, mate. My pleasure.
How was that for an introduction? And all-round great bloke.
All round, yeah, but that's the most important part. I mean, I think our titles don't really tell us a lot about people. It's our impact and our influence, and hopefully we can unpack that a bit today.
That's right. And fashion guru.
I'll take that.
In there. Oh, yeah, mate. Hey, really nice to see you. Where did you grow up? How many kids in the family, mum and dad? And then how did you sort of get through school and get into the training you needed to get into your career?
Yeah, good start. So I'm born and bred in Sydney, Brett, one of four children. I'm right in the middle, the forgotten middle, as many middle children often say, to parents, Anna and Phil, who again are Sydney-based. So we have spent a lot of our time around this area, but we've moved out and lived in different parts of the world. But I've gravitated back and live on the North Shore where our business is based. And so I went to a private school, and I was not what you would consider an academic-focused kid. I had a lot of concentration issues. I probably, in hindsight, would have been diagnosed with ADHD based on the way I treated and was a bit of a rat bag at school. But I was always agitating and wanting to try things and trying to move on to the next thing. So I think that's obviously a little bit instructive to where I've ended up and wanting to keep pushing boundaries. But I had a wonderful upbringing. In fact, we've had cause to reflect more recently, and I really wouldn't change a thing, Brett. I had incredible support of wonderful parents. I've got siblings who I'm very close to and consider best mates. And that's expanded out into our broader network and the way we treat people. So I went to university and did a Bachelor of Applied Science Land Economics, which is a very fancy way of saying property economics. And my mates always thought it was great fun that I had a applied science degree, considering my lack of academia. But that's where I started to really focus on what I wanted to get out of life. And I always had a view that I wanted to get into property. My father and his business partner started a strata management business, one of the first in Australia 45 years ago. So I had an insight into what property was, but like most people, didn't understand strata. But I was also under fairly firm instructions to go out and carve my own path and make sure I got some real lived life experience. And I was fortunate to work for Mirvac for a number of years in development, and then for a small emerging property funds management business called Charter Hall, which now is obviously an absolute monster. And I was there pre-listing.
Yeah, it's now emerged.
It's now emerged. That's exactly right. There was 20 people there at the time, and I learnt from some great people, including David Southern when he was back there, and then Harrow came through. And obviously, there's a huge story around the growth of that business. But I cut my teeth in the corporate world before then. 13 years ago, coming into the family business, which is a strata business.
So when you say strata, and it's a good opportunity to talk about Bright & Duggan, your dad and his business partner started Bright & Duggan over 40 years ago. Can you share with us, a little bit about that story? Because I think it's a big part of your growing up and your family's situation, and obviously how you've landed in that industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, strata's in our DNA, but it's one of those industries that is still emerging from an original cottage industry perspective, and I'll talk about where it's come because it's been significant where we're at today. But like many people back in the 70s, there were some emerging industry forms, and strata was a new type of community living type property ownership, and there were not any at the time, or many specific strata managers who focused just on that. And I know that my father and Ray Bright, who is the father of the other partner in my business, Trevor, they both had a view that they wanted to work in property, but frankly, they were young men with young families and didn't want to work on weekends. So the concept of working midweek and getting your weekends back drove them into strata initially, and they took a gamble on an emerging form of property ownership, which I think was a pretty calculated gamble in hindsight. But there were many times I recall growing up, where mum would be doing the minutes at the dinner table from dad, who was doing a meeting out, and then we'd deliver levies by hand to letterboxes to save on disbursement costs. So it took a long time to get to scale. And I think people look at our business now, 45 years down the track, having double-digit compound annual growth, and say, oh, look at you now. But it did start with a lot of grit, a lot of graft, and it wasn't till the late 90s really that it picked off. So there's 20 years of effort to get to a point where people call you a success. Now, I've obviously come in and ridden the shirt tails of that. And Strata, for anyone out there, for your viewers, is the management of any form of co-living type arrangement. So it could be a apartment building, it could be townhouses with a title, it could be a golf course resort, it could be even somewhere where no one lives, but there's mixed stratum developments, and that's where we like to play. We play in the big space. We do things like Barangaroo and the infrastructure that sits under that, and some of the larger sites around the country, from integrated golf resorts at Hope Island to Magenta Shores, where we do full integrated strata and facilities management.
Okay, so it's a term that's often used, and a lot of Australians now live in strata property. But strata is regulated under what legislation, and was invented when and by whom and why?
Yeah, so it's a Sydney invention. Came out of New South Wales. 1961, strata was invented. It was actually driven by Dick Dusseldorf, the founder of Lend-Lease, who wanted to find a better way to extract value out of subdividing airspace. And it's an incredible story. I mean, it's one of the many things that Dick Dusseldorf gave the world, including what is now considered to be world-class strata laws that started in 1961 here and have evolved over a series of acts. But everywhere you see, particularly in the Commonwealth countries, Brett, strata or community living evolving, they use the template of New South Wales. So we're very lucky to be at the forefront there, and we continue to export that level of governance. So Australia has been very, very important in terms of setting up the way that a lot of the world's community living structures have been put in place, and we continue to lead that. And it's an exciting place to be.
Just with our audience, Chris, share, like our strata legislation has been picked up and used in what other countries?
So Canada, Singapore, Malaysia, parts of the UK, mostly in the Middle East, where they had to come up with a form of strata law in the past 20 years as they evolved significantly.
Or property ownership generally, right?
Correct, and they looked for best-in-class models, and they came to Australia. So Australia continues to lead that, and we've got the wonderful blend of the democracy that's exercised in strata, which can be frustrating for some people because everyone's got a voice and everyone's got a vote. But we balance that with the urban development needs to be able to deliver skylines like we see in Melbourne and Sydney, and to basically accommodate what is now 20% of the Australian population, Brett, that live in strata and growing exponentially.
And how is that different to, say, in New York? What does New York mainly use, and why is the old company title sort of here quite rare as a form of, I guess, owning property?
Yes, a company title is the form or style of structure they have in New York, and it's a model that gives a lot of power to the owners of the property. In fact, it gives them a whole bunch of power that in New South Wales steps a little bit outside of legislation. So for a variety of reasons, it's not popular in Australia. The first is the banks don't value them the same way. So you've got a depressed value situation and a limited lending situation. Company title is inherently limited because as you update legislation, particularly with strata acts and laws, they drag along all of those buildings, and the millions of people who live, and they contemporise those laws on an ongoing basis. Company title are enshrined, and you need to get changes to the Articles of Association, and that requires all the individual members coming on board. So there are still pockets of them, mostly on the inner sort of Sydney sea line, and they're used around control, Brett. They're really interesting. I mean, you can technically deny someone a tenant based on the rules of the building. So some people like that, but it's
and so you have to apply to live there, and
correct.
You have to have references and all sorts of good stuff.
That's the one.
But it is interesting. So for many of our clients have property and look to buy property around the world, and it's always an education for them to see the different ways that property is owned around the world. I've read an article recently where they were just talking about the history of Russia and how Russia didn't have private property coming out of communism, and how it struggled to come up with effective land ownership and things like strata. So strata is another credit to the innovation of our sort of free market economy, if you like. When you mentioned Dick Dusseldorf, I know he was responsible for a lot of the development, I believe, of Thredbo and
off the back of the Snowy Mountain scheme,
which is an amazing guy, amazing innovation. So today, 20% of Australians live in this form of of ownership. Where did you, I know I think I've been involved in Strata now for 25 years, but I think quite like the accounting industry, developing and becoming more professional. What are the biggest changes you've seen in your time now?
Really good questions, Brett. So two parts to it. One is what's private business doing and what's happening in terms of the business context and what's happening at a regulatory level. And they're both pretty well linked at the moment. So clearly we're in a form of ownership that is growing. Every single development that you see across Australia typically has a title owner because it's more efficient. You can scale them better. You can create some incredible cities and you can integrate mixed use. So even when we see land subdivisions, Brett, being done, a lot of them are community title, which is a similar structure, and they require a manager and they require a co-living, cohabitation environment.
So that's good to step out. So, something like Barangaroo is a development, and you mentioned Hope Island is similar.
Yep.
So Barangaroo, let's just sort of unpack Barangaroo for our listeners. Yes, there's commercial office space, which is, I think, when people look from a distance, they see those enormous buildings and they think, okay, they're office buildings. There's also residential buildings that are in there. Now, there's shared space, places for people to walk, there's restaurants. Now, all of this has to be divided up somehow. And as I understand, it has its own electricity generation, or at least generation reserves. Can you tell us a little bit about, the development of a piece of land like Barangaroo and what role strata legislation or community living legislation has played there? How's that structured?
It's an unconventional role, but I personally was involved with the Lend-Lease team there as they were turning the soil because they required some expertise around how to bring all of those moving parts together. You've just mentioned commercial, retail, community spaces, ground plane, but there's also a city underneath Barangaroo that delivers parking, parcels, security, transport, removals, everything that's shared amongst all those elements, which include residential.
Public roads, infrastructure linking to Wynyard, et cetera.
Yeah, and so there's also about to be delivered about 700 residential apartments of ultra-high wealth properties, which are now under completion. So you put all that together and you've got a framework of lots of moving parts. So we get involved as a strata manager to manage the statement that governs the interrelationship with all those entities, which is voting, compliance, approvals, but most importantly, cost, because everything needs to be shared proportionally. And the Barangaroo statement is singularly unique in that it evolved a cost share methodology that you as an accountant would love because it was proportional to use. And it also allowed a couple of innovative measures in it where a member, you take a $1 billion commercial tower, could agree to upgrade their services and pay extra for it, and then obviously pay for anything they shared through the statement. So it's a wonderful adaptation of, and also a reflection of where Strata's moving.
Sort of like Strata on steroids.
This is Strata in the UFC. This is about as good as you get. But every development we see from AMP Tower in Sydney on the foreshore there, which is a mix of 9 different stratums, believe it or not, which has the clubs, it's got leasehold, it's got freehold, it's got 4 strata plans. That type of complexity is now the norm. And developers embrace that, and these types of mechanisms also give the opportunity for strata managers to show their professionalism. So go back to that journey of professionalism. We've gone from my parents and their business partners being in a bedroom licking stamps and sending out levies to managing...
And to be fair, on a, the first strata developments were maybe 6 ups, 12 ups.
Yeah, 4 ups.
4 ups, with the stairway, 2 down, 2 up. So very rudimentary developments, but suitable for what people were looking for at the time. Yeah. And it just shows the level of innovation that developers and government, I guess, have driven, but driven by the consumers' use needs and that dragging really the profession forward, the strata management profession forward to deal with this complexity.
Yeah, I mean, I yearn for some of the elegant simplicity. External plumbing and a few things is good in some occasions, but it's not possible to accommodate the growth across Australia that we need. So the strata industry has obviously professionalised. Our business is a pretty clear example of that. We've been from a family business to a succession plan where my father wanted to exit, a complicated succession plan, a partnership and exiting family businesses. And there's I'm happy to talk to you about that story because your business was singularly important in seeking a solution there, which I think is one of the better solutions I've ever heard of from my experience. But we've now since then acquired probably half a dozen businesses or more, started up 3 or 4. And since joining up with an ASX listed partner about 3 years ago, I've doubled the size of our business, against the headwinds of COVID, which has been challenging. But there's plenty of opportunity out there for consolidation of a very fragmented market. I mean, our business still, despite being number 2 or 3 by way of lots under management or revenue, still represents 2% of the national strata market.
And that's right. So let's talk about that. So the strata market is how many managers today?
Look, there's about 5,000, Brett, that we've got as members of SCA National.
And probably the top 20 do more than 80% of the lots, I guess. And you've just mentioned there, but it's worth talking about because I think, I say to our business owning clients that succession planning is the biggest challenge facing private business owners across the economy, and not just here in Australia, but globally. There's very few people that have real expertise in the space. We've done 54 transactions in the accounting market, so we know a little bit about helping people that are 60 plus deal with, what comes next in their business. But I remember, I think you mentioned to me that your dad was not well and thinking about, what the future held. I remember I jumped in the car and I said, right, I'll come up and see you both. And we had a bit of a chat and sort of talked about, okay, what comes next. But, in that discussion, you had a 50-50 partnership, the Brights and the Duggans. And there was really a discussion about, what does Phil do for the 4 children in the family? How does he de-stress his universe, after running a big thing for a long time, less than 30 when he started?
Yeah, correct.
26 or, a young man with a young family, and he was 70 odd at the time. So very similar sort of questions that most clients in that position have. But he was lucky, and the family, your family and the Brights were lucky that you were in there and Trevor was in there, both much younger men, which often, and professionals than your dad and Trevor's late father. But when you sort of thought, when we sort of had that first discussion, where was your mind in terms of what would be the future of the business and the partnership, and where have you ended up? How did that happen? And I think it's an exciting place you've ended up in terms of your ability to grow and develop not just yourself and your people, but the business. Can you share that story with us? Because I think that's really interesting.
Yeah,
and it's not just a strata story. I think it's anyone who's built a significant family business, I think, faces these types of questions.
No, and it's probably one of our most significant achievements, Brett, but it underscores how many challenges there were along the way. So I got involved with the FBA, the Family Business Association, FBA, on the way through, and that was really helpful to be exposed to a whole bunch of other family businesses who had struggled, or successfully or not, with succession planning. And that was helpful to create some pretty real examples of when it goes pear-shaped. And that led me to want to get as far ahead of that transition and that succession plan as we could. And that's obviously how we spent a lot of time with you and your team and had some of those conversations. But it was incredibly challenging to bring together a lot of the moving parts with stakeholders who wanted different things, and everyone
and sometimes don't know what they want.
Yeah, and there's and that's what happens when you get a business that grows without a really structured set of documents that started on a napkin 45 years ago. And I'm sure there's many of your clients out there who are nodding. This is a fairly common equation that people sit in. I was lucky because I was a little bit arm's length and could be more objective to how we dragged the business through. And a lot of what I had to do was counsel our partners around what's the best way through this. And I needed to park my own personal desires. My desire was simply just to effect a successful succession plan and put in play the right advisors, the right legal framework, and structuring a win-win, which involved a fair whack of compromise from everyone. And that was the key takeout I took there. If you try and grind your foot into the other party, you're not going to end up with a win-win. So you need to parlay everything you can, from what structure is going to work best in the future, what partner do you bring on board, how's the equity split, and everyone needed to walk out of there feeling like they had a win. And I think that's where we ended up. We were very lucky that through your business and through the market appetite, we had a good 50 companies that wanted to invest in us, from private enterprise to family office to private equity to trade sales and the like. So we were very blessed around choice. Ultimately, there was only one business that fit that complicated structure of what we ended up wanting as a group, which was our business partners, the Brights, my father exiting, which was reflective of our family and what we wanted, and then myself as an individual wanting to grow my own career. So we were very lucky to partner with someone. And the only way I can point to an instructive lesson there is you need to have your ducks in a row, you need to have your business organised, and you need to have the right advisors on board. And that's scary at a point because there's a lot of work that's required up front. But without that, I think, the house of cards can come over a little bit too easy. But I'm very, very pleased, Brett, the way we ended up, and it's been very successful for all parties. And I think if you asked everyone how that transaction went, they'd all give it a big tick.
Yeah, no, very, very interesting. So, looking back, people underrate the value of being able to think flexibly, to be able to think from both parties' positions. And because I think often people think that the counterparty has a fixed position, and I think often that's not true. A lot of people are doing it for the first time, so they don't really know exactly what they want. They've got some things that they need to happen, but they don't know all the ways that I guess you can get there. That was something I certainly saw. And, for every business listening to this, I really don't believe that you can ever be too organised. And so, I urge all of our clients and anyone listening that, at some point you either die or you sell a business or you do some sort of transaction around succession. And the best time to get ready for that is 5 years ago or yesterday, because it gives you more time to change your mind and to flip things over and think about things, so that the first time that you think about a transaction or some type of succession arrangement isn't a day where you need to, where you must do it. So it was very interesting to watch, and with your dad, he's, I think, 70 at the time that we started these conversations. And there's often there's this colloquialism that, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And to put, our listeners who've built significant businesses that are over 60 at ease, that's absolute crap. I have seen in Phil and many other, senior business leaders an ability, what has made them successful is an ability to learn, an ability to think, an ability to take advice and seek curiously, ways to solve problems. So that's certainly something I took out of the exercise, is that, often as the senior person there, you can have counterparties who are often younger thinking, okay, well, that guy's got a position, he can't change it. I think that's a, false assumption as well. Now, the business today, you've got Jones Ling, an ASX listed company, as a partner in the business. What difference has that made in terms of, just from your own personal point of view, as well as the business, in terms of the rigor and professionalism that a public company requires? And how's that sort of helped move Bright & Duggan forward in terms of professionalising that business?
Yeah, Brett, it's been very good for me personally. I like to be pushed. I like to grow. I mean, you're someone that's always been pushing a growth mindset. For me, it's about continually evolving myself and stretching my horizon. So they've been incredibly supportive by, pushing us through a growth mindset. They are a growth business at their core. They're a very unique business that has business partnerships across all of their companies, 90, 100 plus companies. So we are their first foray into the Strata market. And they're obviously very well capitalised, they're very well structured, and the financial discipline has been the most instructive and helpful for us. Having to report, and I sit on the operational board, representing the Strata interest, but hearing the way a listed company, which is now, on a bit of a tear and about $2 billion plus growth, it's off the back of what they've established around investing in people, high energy, high integrity, and growth mindset.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people that they partner with have, lesser experience than some of the other people in the market, but they've got the right attributes. So for me, it energised me around how to grow our business. And as I said, we've doubled in terms of output since we've partnered with them, and that was 2.5 years ago against the headwinds of COVID. So I'm very happy with it. But it's pushed me. It's pushed me in ways, and it's pushed Trevor, who's my business partner, in ways that we probably didn't expect, but we haven't pushed back against, because we've both enjoyed the environment. And I think it's pushed us to be much more creative about the way we view our business model. We've now partnered with a few more recent businesses that we've had a similar business partnership model that they have put in place, which is not dissimilar to yours, the owner-driver model. I mean, it is, in our view, one of the only ways of being able to secure talent in a really congested market and get that mindset of someone who is going to run your business as if it's their own. And that is ultimately, I think, the way to scale.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. So, it's good that you've raised it. Human motivation is important. And if you can give people ownership and not, a sense of ownership is good. Ownership, in fact, is even better. And as you've said, have those people that have integrity, have, high IQ and high energy, then you've really got something, I think, in as you put it, a sort of talent congested market. I think it's really thinking about, how do you unlock people's genuine potential? How do you see that person really play at their best? And often, people have never met somebody who's amazing at what they do. So they don't necessarily have the internal belief that they can be all that they can be. But putting a structure in place that allows them to make the effort, get the reward for making that effort, is quite interesting, because it does build this sort of flywheel effect of, okay, if I put in the effort and I get this return, then that makes sense. So I should probably keep doing that. I think it's a very, very, very interesting thing for people to talk about, particularly in private business land, where often ownership is congested and there's very stagnant mindsets about, well, Chris, you're the son, so I'm the father, so you can only do this, and you can, and then when you're a bit older, you'll be able to do that. So, we would probably think that thinking today is anachronistic, but it's still very, very common. So as you now look at the strata industry, what do you see as, the things that you can do that will give you an advantage in that market?
Yeah, so that fixed mindset is really apparent. And just before I get on that next piece, Brett, going back to the way we viewed business, prior to having a partner in it, we were in that sort of very tunnel vision world, and it was very common, particularly from a founder perspective. They batten down around those options, and they feel like it's going to diminish their value. In fact, it opens up those pathways, and we've seen it. One of the really important things was when my father exited the business, the new partner said, well, we want you to put skin in the game. So I bought in for a significant chunk to show my commitment, but also to buy into all of those drivers that we now find are so important to leverage with our staff. So that fixed mindset can absolutely be changed, but you need to go about it the right way. And a sledgehammer is not often the way. You need to cuddle to kindness sometimes and have some honest chats. But I think as long as you are open to a flexible mindset, you'll get there. But the strata market for our business is
which is just on that. It's quite a nice way to put it, in that there's a lot of talk about a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, as if they're two completely different animals. But I see people who have a growth mindset in one respect, on one topic, a fixed mindset on another. I like that idea that you just sort of slipped in there, the sort of a flexible mindset. If you can get somebody who's flexible around the things that don't matter, inflexible about the things that do matter, then you can start to break down that fixedness, if you like, in that it is true that there are some things you should be absolutely unbending and unchanging on. However, there are very few number of things. And so, trying to take somebody who sort of mentioned that, do you cuddle them or do you sledgehammer them? Or in reality, I think what we try and do is we try and, start with getting them to be flexible to some degree about some things, and then see if you can grow that willingness to be flexible. And then I do think feedback does a lot to change people's mindsets, in that when they are a little flexible, I think work from home is the best example, over the last 2 years, right? So pre-pandemic, many business leaders, let's just say over a certain age or just maybe under a certain age, would be like, no, you cannot possibly work from home and achieve anything. Well, as it turns out, you can work from home and achieve quite a few things. You can't do everything as well as you can if you can get some people together, but you can do a lot of things. And so that all at home or all in the office, I think mindset has been shifted dramatically. And so now we're calling it flexible working arrangements, which is, I think, quite helpful in that, you don't have a fixed position, but you don't have a radically do whatever you want position either.
Yeah, and don't assume the position of the other party. That's the other piece. I mean,
I'm huge on that because, I sort of want to labour that for people, is that when you go into a negotiation, particularly around succession or buying into a business, you don't assume that the other person knows very much. Often they've never sold their business before. They've never done a partnership before. They don't really know. You assume that what you say they understand. They don't have your lived experience. They may not have your academic qualifications. They may not have your financial knowledge or your legal understanding, but you're talking to them because they've got the knowledge they have. So I see many, many negotiations, not just in terms of acquisitions or partnerships, but around salary or job descriptions or goodness knows what, where, people assume that they know the other person's position.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And again, from personal experience, every time we now go into a partnership discussion, we take it back to the base and we say, what do you want to get out of it? And how can we as a business work together? And one of your questions was, what's next for us? So we're diversifying our business model into strata management, facilities management, anything to do with the management of the built form, particularly with a residential overlay, will be there. And if we look to our US counterparts, and I spent a bit of time studying them, the homeowners association model in the US is now where the predominant form of revenue comes from non-strata or homeowner HOA-related services. So 15% of the income is your core management services. The rest are your horizontal and vertically integrated service lines. So whether it be cleaning, gardening, security, management services, building management, or B2C services, which are the new frontier of opportunity, because our business obviously manages a significant number of buildings, but in those buildings are consumers, and those consumers all have needs. And if we can leverage a trust relationship to those consumers, we can deliver valued services to them. And I think going back to your pandemic scenario there, people have learnt to consume at home. It's harder to consume services within a strata plan because of the traditional physical limitations of getting in. So the strata manager and the building manager provides a really convenient leveraged opportunity and trust relationship into those marketplaces.
Yeah, and look, I was just up in Queensland in January, and a friend of ours had moved into a new building, and I was struck by how different just the sort of reception, PO, mailboxes. So, once upon a time, everyone had a tiny little box. Now they had larger boxes. There's places to have things delivered. They're paying for a sort of concierge because that wasn't originally in the plan when they all bought their units, but they found they had the space and that service was valuable to the residents because of the amount of deliveries and commerce that's really coming through that front entrance. So very, very interesting. So you see a future, when you say you've got 2% of the market, how many people do you think live in the buildings that you manage?
Oh, there's millions, Brett. We've got the numbers in New South Wales alone. There's 2 million people that reside in strata. The East Coast obviously is where our patch is. We've got 16 offices up and down the East Coast, and that's where 85% of the national strata market is. But by 2030, they think there could be as many as 50% of people, particularly in major cities, living in strata or community living. So our marketplace is growing, which means that we start to get more congested for competition. Resources and skilled people are in high demand. So the great labour shortage, which has been precipitated by the end of COVID and the opening up of restrictions, is exacerbated in strata because of a limited supply pool. But at an industry level, what we've done in New South Wales and part of my national agenda moving forward is to overlay a professional standard scheme. So we sought and achieved a professional standard scheme that commenced last year in New South Wales. the first one for 5 years and one of 16 vocations nominated as a professional standard scheme. So like lawyers and accountants and CPAs and valuers, strata managers are there in New South Wales, and that's part of our longer term strategy to attract talent from a vocational perspective into the industry of strata management.
Yeah, so it is really moving from a hobby to an industry.
Oh, absolutely.
There is, the traditional strata manager might have been an admin person that moved over into getting trained on the job over many, many years. But this commitment to training and development, I think, is absolutely critical to the forward movement of the industry.
Yeah, and it's very necessary. So in order to service,
because of the education levels of the people that you're looking after in these buildings that sit on these committees.
To service these communities. And these communities now, 40 years ago, strata was the poor cousin of housing affordability. So people were in them, typically not out of desire, out of necessity. Now to live in a CBD location falling over the harbour, you're typically living in a multi-owned property. So it's not uncommon to have an ASX listed CFO query your financials for a strata manager. So you get that type of relationship, and then totally. They tend to be the biggest pain in the backside, Brett. But that's okay.
But you've got barristers, you've got doctors, you've got very senior professionals, politicians. So you got serious people asking serious questions, and so that is demanding a much higher level of engagement and, frankly, intellect and professional training from the people that you're seeking to put into these roles.
Yeah, but what an exciting opportunity! I mean, if I'm 19 years old and I'm looking at becoming an accountant, obviously I'll go and become one of the disciple of yours, Brett. But if I'm looking at becoming a lawyer or something like this, or Strata has, I think, leagues ahead of it in terms of opportunity for growth. And we've got young people who, in their mid-20s are hitting their straps, and they can develop a skill set, work into a job, and through some of the pathways that have been created from our business and others, get into a partnership position, which builds a career and a business for life for them. So this is not a job. And I know you've got a strong view on the way millennials can sort of pop around and don't really get focused on a couple of things, but
which is interesting, right? And for our audience to hear it, I've always believed that values are eternal, that it is no more likely that a 75-year-old has good values than a 15-year-old. There's a lot of, talk about different generations. A lot of the younger millennial workers struggle to find a place that resonates with their values and, frankly, demands the best of them. And so many workplaces have taken this view, well, let's pander to a young person and tell them they're great and make their life easy, otherwise they'll leave. Well, that might be true, but what we found is that good young people are just like good old people and good middle-aged people. They want to do great work. Yes, they want to be valued and respected and all the rest of it, but they want to be tested. They want the opportunity to work hard and develop themselves. And once they get that sense that, well, hang on, if I put in the effort, I get the muscles and I know how to do something, which competence, genuine confidence comes from actual competence, then young people are absolutely fantastic in your business. If you can win the battle of their brain to say, well, hang on, if you sit still for 3 minutes and learn it really how to do something, then you win. You feel great about yourself, and that's ultimately what you get from doing great work. It's not the money that you get; it's the self-esteem that you get from knowing that you can do something well. So I think that there's in our industry huge opportunities because the inherent need for great financial assistance is massive in an increasingly complex financial world. I also think in Strata there's huge growth opportunities, and so for any young person that wants to push themselves and apply themselves, there's really unlimited opportunity.
No, I absolutely agree. And the parallels between the two marketplaces are very similar. There's unbridled opportunity, and we're not constrained by some of the perceptions of our profession. We come from a relatively low base, I'll admit that, because people typically have a poor experience with their manager because it's our job to tell you all the bad things about your property. We tell you we have to raise levies, and not unlike a property manager, we don't give you anything in return. There's no rent coming for that levy. We tell you no. We tell you have to do things in accordance with legislation. We frustrate the process because we're, obliged and delegated to tell you how things need to be. So we've got a big position where, we're coming from a lower base, but then you look at the upside and the way we can create harmony, bring communities together and solve complex issues within communities. And I can tell you what, that's what floats my boat. But not just the young people, Brett. We're starting an initiative called Dad's Army, which is basically trying to tap into retirees who we want just to get on the phone and have a yarn with people. So, I mean, I've been hearing ad nauseum about the call centres around Australia and how they're all backed up and, they're all offshore. People in today's age want digitally accessible services, but they want to be able to talk to someone.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for retired school teachers to jump on the phone and talk to our clients and just hear what their issues are and just to be empathetic. They don't have to do much. They just have to be a listening and respective ear. And I think that's the missing piece these days.
I think it's, because we have a youth-obsessed culture, we have all this discussion about young people, and that's important. But I've said for years now that, basically the only discrimination still tolerated in our society, you can't be sexist, you can't be homophobic, but you can be ageist. There's still a huge amount of ageism around, big corporate Australia post 50, they don't want to know about you. Many, right across society, older people are not valued. And so any initiative that makes employment accessible to certainly people over 55 and certainly over 60, I think there's a lot of opportunity there as well. And to my earlier comment, these people are capable of learning, developing, using technology. The last 2 years in particular, a lot of our clients who've got grandkids have become tech wizards. It's a really underutilized and unseen part of our community. And let's face it, Chris, a lot of people in these plans that you're looking after, these communities that you're looking to serve, they're not all 21. So, they value talking to a mature grown up with some life experience.
Well, I think you'll find that the average age of a committee member is typically about 50. I mean, it's just people who want to spend time and invest in the governance and decision-making of a building are typically older people. I mean, we're starting to see younger people take more of an interest, but at this stage, we're dealing with a much older generation who relate more to personal contact. Going back, COVID was one of the best things that happened to our industry. It allowed us to adapt and change the relationship with our clients overnight. We could have meetings like this with 100 people on Zoom, and my Strata manager doesn't have to travel across town, doesn't have to worry about their safety, can be home and having dinner with their kids at the end of the meeting, and can set rules.
Can do four times as many meetings.
But can mute someone. I mean, you can't mute someone in real life. You can tell Mrs. Jones, listen, we've heard that 7 times. We're moving on to the vote. So there's a silver lining to some of these.
Yeah, I agree. You have to find the silver lining, right?
Yeah. So we now have, I think, a better retention strategy in place as an industry because we can offer more flexibility for people.
Yeah, and look, to your early comment about your dad, looking to be in the property industry but not be in real estate on Saturdays. A lot of the Strata work has been done at night. A lot of these meetings were done at night. Now, if you can use Zoom, for example, then a lot of those meetings can be done at lunchtime. They can be done at morning tea time or afternoon tea time. And even if they are then done at the end of the day, I suspect they can be done pretty quickly. The thing I found, probably the 2 best things I found with Zoom is that I can use Zoom or Teams to meet with anyone in the world very, very easily. And people are very keen and happy to do that because it's easy for them. The second one, though, is that you can sort of get a more diverse group of people together quickly. While it is a bit more transactional than sitting face to face with somebody, a lot of the things that need to be done are transactional. So, in terms of a meeting for a Strata plan, a lot of that business is transactional.
Correct.
And if you can get the transactional stuff done swiftly and efficiently, then it creates a lot of time for the relationship piece. Now, I always like to ask people at the end of these chats that I share with people, Chris, a motto, quote, or thought that best summarises your approach to life.
So, look, there's quite a personal one for me at the moment, which is a quote from Mary McKillop, Brett, which is, never see a need without doing something about it. And it's a thing my father lived his life by. And I'd never given it a word until I really heard him sort of, reflect on it. But it's something that I've found. I mean, my personal life, my volunteer life, I'm still the guy who'll put his hand up to be the P&F president at the local school and the local netball club and everywhere under the sun. And I just like doing it. I like magnifying my impact, and I like helping people. I mean, it's the similarities between your business model of helping people go somewhere. I just like to empower people to achieve their best and see and hope that they can be better off for the experience of dealing with me. So I like to see a need and do something about it. And I think the world needs a lot of people leaning into more of those types of endeavours rather than pure selfish things, because you can build a great, wonderful, successful business for yourself, but if you're not engaging with others, it's for nothing.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting in that, today we have access to information like we've never had before. And so that has led to, I'd like to think as a sort of development phase, that's led to more criticism of people and institutions and, quite a foul tone to a lot of it than we've ever seen before. I'd like to think that with all of that information, we can move past the bratish phase of that to saying, well, hang on, if you want things to be better, now that you can see, with more clarity and more depth, a lot more about what's going on in the world, and hopefully we can motivate people to do something about it, even in only the smallest ways, rather than just be, Twitter warriors.
Yeah. What are you doing about it? That should be the mantra there, and hopefully,
absolutely.
Hopefully, I continue to influence, the broader Strata industry in my own business, but that I get joy out of it, and that's what we're all here for.
Absolutely, mate. I want to thank you for your time today. I was really looking forward to seeing you. It's a great excuse to catch up with people on a Friday morning, and and try and share further, your insights. For all of our listeners, I think you've enjoyed your time with Chris today. He's a terrific fella, and I hope this has been valuable to you. And as I love to say, have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Be Better Off Show. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate and review on Apple Podcasts.
Have a great day.